When people think about global warming, they think about the melting ice caps and polar bears stranded on floating chunks of melting ice. What most people don't think about is our coral reefs. Around 1 in 7 people around the world depend on our coral reef fisheries for food or income. So, how does global warming affect our coral reefs? To understand how global warming affects corals, let's start with the basics. Most people think of corals as plants, but they're actually technically animals. A coral is made up of millions of tiny structures called polyps. Polyps are mouths with tentacles around them. Inside of the polyps are small plants that are able to photosynthesize and create food. Their other food source is their sticky tentacles. Anything that swims by will stick to the tentacles and be sucked into the mouth of the polyp. These creatures live in a very specific climate, and when water temperature changes even by 1 degree Celsius, their lives can become endangered. As a human, if your body temperature rises that much, you've got a fever. In a coral reef, raising the water temperature that much has a very similar effect, but instead of a fever, it's called bleaching because the coral turns white. When the coral is warmer than usual, the algae inside of them that photosynthesizes can't produce food for the coral anymore. The coral senses something is wrong and ends up expelling the organisms from inside of them, similar to vomiting. Once the coral gets rid of the algae, it loses its color that is provided by the algae, and all you can see is the skeleton. The coral has now lost its main source of food and slowly starves to death. When a coral is pure and white, it's still alive. However, most functions that keep it alive, like growth and food intake, are prohibited. Unless the temperature is reduced, the coral will die within a couple of weeks. You can tell it's dead when algae starts growing on it. Once the coral reef is dead, the fish lose their habitat as well. This is when coral bleaching can impact society. Without fish, many people will lose their food source and jobs. Another impact is that people don't realize that a lot of new medicines are coming from coral. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has even referred to corals as the medicine cabinets of the 21st century, citing that coral can help with Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, and even cancer. Losing coral means losing lives. Scientists have declared that the Great Barrier Reef is dead, which is true for parts of it. The Australian-based reef is actually the length of the eastern coast of the United States. It's large enough that some parts can die while others are very much alive. The good news is that if we can lower our carbon emissions enough, we can potentially lower sea surface temperatures back to a livable temperature for coral. The hardest part will be convincing our leadership to help us do so. Reporting from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln for Global Student Square, I'm Science Editor Ian Mason.